This is ABC 7 News, Chicago's #1 news with Jose Sanders, Judy Sue, weather with meteorologist Tracy Butler, and Roz Barron's traffic. This is ABC 7 News this morning.
A big break for former Governor George Ryan as the U.S. Supreme Court orders a lower court to reconsider the appeal of his corruption conviction. Ryan is 4.5 years into a 6.5-year sentence. His attorneys argue jury instructions in his trial were flawed. A federal court ruled they were late in making that appeal, but the Supreme Court says that is wrong and the lower court must hear the appeal.
Well, our legal analyst, attorney Thomas Glasgow, joins us now with a closer look at exactly what that decision means. Good to see you once again.
Good morning.
Good morning, Thomas.
Both of you.
So when would the court actually was likely to hear this whole thing?
Well, it's been remanded from the Supreme Court back to the Seventh Circuit. They've got to go through filings. They may have oral arguments. This could be sometime in the fall before we actually see a decision by the Seventh Circuit on the remand from the Supreme Court to take into consideration their rulings in subsequent cases.
Now, Ryan's attorney is saying that if they win this appeal, that he would be freed. Is that right?
It's possible. Remember, they're only appealing certain counts, those so-called honest services charges. And if those are somehow removed, or if he's granted a new trial, or if they say, hey, look, there was error, we're going to reverse his convictions, it would only be with regard to those. They are not contesting the other charges, such as the tax charges or some of the other charges that ended him up in prison to begin with.
Are there other options that could cause the governor to be released early?
Well, remember, in the federal system, you do 80% of what you were sentenced to. He was sentenced to 6.5 years, so he's due to get out into 2013 anyway. So could it shorten it? It could shorten it anywhere up to about 8 months. Other than that, I don't think it's going to make a major impact on whether or not he's released. The big thing is, could he be granted a new trial? If he were granted a new trial, I think we'd have to go through this whole process all over again to determine whether the honest services rule applies in this particular case.
Okay, Thomas, quickly we want to touch on the other big case that's going on right now in Chicago in the courts, of course, the Hudson family murder trial. How do you think that trial is going? Yesterday there was police testimony on the alleged gun used, but the defense is arguing there's very little physical evidence.
Well, remember, in this case, there's no DNA, there's no witnesses, there's no fingerprints to link Mr. Balfour to the gun that was involved in the shooting. When it was found, there was no DNA on the gun, and there were no fingerprints on the gun. The only gunshot residue that they found was in the defendant's car, and the defendant's car was not the same car where he was alleged to have shot the child. And since, you know, there's no eyewitnesses going into the home, and there's the allegations of domestic violence and the threats of domestic violence, which were never reported to the police, the only linkage that they have between the gun and the defendant, Mr. Balfour, right now, is a man who saw him at a party in a subsequent time, but he never reported that to the police, and he never said anything about it. The only time he came forward was after he heard news reports regarding the matter.
Quickly before we go, what influence do you think or impact is Jennifer Hudson's presence in the courtroom having?
Well, I think that weighs heavily with the jury because they know whatever decision they make is going to be scrutinized on a higher level. In this particular case, I don't know whether or not they're going to particularly per se look at Jennifer Hudson and say, we're going to make that decision because of her, but it's a factor.
Right, really is. All right, sir, thank you very much. Two big cases.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.
It is 6:07.